and welcome to another episode of Fundy Tidings. I'm your host, Jay Remer, and with me today is Vincent Prager. Vincent is the creator of the Oppenheimer-Prager Museum here in St. Andrews, and the last time we sat down to do this interview was 7 years ago.
We're actually probably doing better this year than last year, and what particularly pleases me this year is that obviously the people that we're getting are local people from St. Andrews, from New Brunswick, and now a few people from Nova Scotia and PEI. In the past, we've had people from all over the world, from New Zealand and Australia and Asia and England and everywhere, but not as many from locally. And this year, they've all been local, and it's been very gratifying.
So why don't you give us a little sort of background and a sort of a synopsis of this museum. To be honest with you, it is one of my favorite museums.
Thank
you. It's one of my favorite museums because it's a house museum. And I love house museums.
It started because I wanted to make a donation of some of the paintings of my grandfather and my mother to, in particular, museums in Montreal and other cities with which there's another connection. And the problem with museums these days is that they have much larger collections than they have wall space. They will never commit, if you donate a picture, they will never commit to showing it. And there's some logic to that, but only some and not much. And so for example, with the Beaverbrook Art Gallery in Fredericton, I did make a donation. I think it was about 29 paintings by my grandfather, but there was a condition that some of them had to be on show at all times, and that's, as far as I know, that's happening. Other museums, like the Metropolitan Museum in New York, wanted to have one of my grandfather's paintings, which is a painting that I happen to like very much. But they will make absolutely no commitment ever to show it, and I didn't think that I was interested in having just for the glory of saying that the Metropolitan Museum has one of my grandfather's paintings. That it didn't make sense, so I declined. My grandfather, so that your audience understands, my grandfather was one of the founders of the German Impressionist school called the Secession in the late 1890s, and he co-organized with other people, of course, the first show that they put on, and he was the liaison with John Singer Sargent, and Sargent exhibited at that exhibition as well. And I actually have, in my home in Montreal, I have one of the pictures that was exhibited at that particular show. And so my grandfather really divided his life from the 1890s until his death in 1966 between England and Germany, and then after 1933 left Germany and stayed permanently in England and became a British citizen in 1936. And then when we moved to Canada in 1949, in fact on the 26th of July this year, it'll be 71 years that we arrived on July 26, 1949 in Canada. So then my grandparents divided their time, as did Lady Beaverbrook, in a way, between half a year in England and half a year in Canada. And just a little bit of an offside, not offside, but aside, my grandparents, like Lady Beaverbrook, always spent winters in Canada and summers in England, because the weather in England was very, very bad for older people, especially in the 1950s and 60s, and houses didn't have central heating, and there was a lot of smog. And that's how I think my grandparents and Lady Beaverbrook met on some of these voyages on the Canadian Pacific Empress liners. But so my grandfather and was, as I mentioned, my mother inherited some of the talent from my grandfather, and she studied with Paul Collin in Paris, and lived with the daughter of Marc Chagall in Paris, and became quite a well-known painter, became an officer of the Order of Canada. And the museum really resulted from, as I mentioned, the fact that I had no control over what would happen to any of their works that I donated, but also their wish that as much of their work stay together. They never had a real interest in selling more than was necessary to have a comfortable lifestyle, and they wanted everything kept together. And I was walking along Katie's Cove on the far side one morning, shortly after I had the right to get the house next door to Dayspring, and I thought, the way the Dayspring is laid out is perfect as a museum, because all the rooms, all the main rooms except for a couple are on the main floor, and they all flow one into the other. And wouldn't that be a good idea? So that was how the idea of the museum started, was the wish of my mother and my grandfather, and the fact that the museum was architecturally designed. There's no real reason why it would be in St. Andrews other than the fact that the house is there. And so, as you mentioned, the museum became sort of a tripartite combination of the actual house itself, because Dayspring is a very architecturally interesting and historically significant house. Lots of famous people were there, including Dali. Then there are the 300 paintings that we've put up on the walls so far, about half from my grandfather, half from my mother. And also I have my collection of antique and classic cars there. So, and there's jewelry and there are toys, and it's sort of a mishmash of everything. A lot of interesting letters and memorabilia, and so it's a bit of something for everybody.
Well, I remember when you hatched this idea, and I remember we talked about it, and I thought, what a fascinating idea, because I knew your mother, and I was very familiar with her work, but I'm not sure I think I knew that your grandfather was an artist, but I didn't know his stature until I saw the paintings. And then I went in to see the paintings, and I was really, I was incredibly impressed. I thought, this is a very important collection. And so for people who actually are interested in seeing a large body of a single artist in one place, this is an incredible opportunity, because not only do you have your father, who was an Impressionist painter, but you have your mother, your grandfather, but your mother, who was really sort of a post-Impressionist, very Matisse kind of, and watercolors. She was a watercolorist primarily, and your grandfather was an oil painter. And the styles are quite different. It's not like some families, like the Wyeths, where they sort of paint similar, and you see a few changes. These are quite different, divergent styles. And so it's a very exciting thing. And of course, the museum itself, it has so many rooms in it that you've got all this acreage of wall space to hang these paintings. What are the some of the? Oh, I know. The other thing was, I can remember maybe the first year that you were open. I remember going upstairs to see where you were sorting through some archives, which were massive, and the fact that you went through all of those family papers and are still going through them is remarkable. But I'm wondering, because you would always pull out a little treasure, like, oh, here's a letter from Einstein, and it really would be a letter from Einstein, and it went well with the portrait that your mother did of him.
Yeah, and it's hanging on the wall.
And it's hanging on the wall. I'm wondering, in the last several years since you've been combing through these archives, have you turned up any other little treasures? And also, what are the things that draw people most to the museum?
Okay, well,
those two separate questions.
Well, three questions actually. One about the space.
Yeah.
You're right about the upstairs. The upstairs is interesting because Dayspring is an interesting house. There's no central staircase. There are two small staircases going up to the two second floor wings, as it were. And the only way to get from one part of the wing, to the upper wing, to the other part is to go through a very narrow little passageway that goes over the great room. And that has been a fun place for surprises and things. But we intended to open up the sort of the staff part of that second floor this year, but because of the COVID virus, we weren't able to deal with the lighting and the other changes that need to be done, or sort out what's going to go up there. But hopefully next year they're going to be there are 5 rooms that were bedrooms for the servants in the days when those existed, which are actually very lovely rooms and are interesting in and of themselves because they look like ocean liner bedrooms, and they have original broadloom carpeting that goes back to the 1920s, which was apparently one of the original designs ever, and likewise linoleum. And we're going to have all sorts of different types of exhibits up there. So starting next year, there'll be some more up there. There's also a huge room that was the theater room where Sir James Dunn used to send his private DC-3 aircraft to New York from Pocalogan to pick up movie reels, and they would be brought back, and they would have movie shows on the weekends up there, probably before many American cities got to see them. Why they put this ballroom theater up in the area where the staff rooms were, I don't know, but you had to go through those bedrooms in order to get there. As far as the archives go, I come from a family that nobody threw anything away, even old Christmas wrapping paper, and I suppose that's good, because if they hadn't, we wouldn't have a museum, because everything has been there. And you're right, we found all sorts of really interesting things. I did find by accident this letter to my grandfather from Einstein, and in fact Einstein plays a sort of a pivotal role in my life, because that's how my parents met each other. So no Einstein, no Vincent. But we also found, again, I knew nothing about it. My mother was a great fan and friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and she would often go to Ottawa and sit in the visitors gallery in the House of Commons and watch him debate, and did a lot of sketches of him from there. But I opened up a little box, and I found a sketch of my mother by Trudeau. Oh. So that one time when she was in the visitors gallery doing sketches of Trudeau, he did a sketch of her while he was sitting at his desk as Prime Minister. And so my mother got him to sign it, and so that's on display at the museum as well.
Yeah.
And we found all sorts of other little odds and ends. I found the invitation that my parents, or that my mother got actually, during the October crisis when the FLQ were kidnapping people and murdering people, and the British Trade Commissioner Jasper Cross, who was kidnapped, he and his wife were friends of my parents, and my mother was invited to lunch on the day that he was kidnapped. And I found the invitation, and I checked the date to make sure it was right. So we had the invitation to lunch on the day he was kidnapped.
Wow.
And then a personal letter from him to my parents thanking them for taking care of his wife while he was kidnapped, and an invitation to a party that was thrown in his honor afterwards, which I actually attended in Montreal. So that's fun. That's up on there as well. And there are all sorts of other letters and
it's a very eclectic
things.
I mean, it's a very eclectic collection, so people who are interested in history, especially 20th century European history, can get quite a thrill.
Well, the archives, I'd be happy if we could ever find someone who likes to do archival work and who also speaks German, because so much of the earlier correspondence is in German. But we've had a very nice guy for the last 3 years who has been working in the summers on the archives and sorting all the all the correspondence and putting them in Ziploc bags by year.
Yeah.
And we've done that, and now we're on to putting each year in order chronologically, because I don't think that we can decide what's important or not without having a proper time frame in which to put all this stuff. So that's going on a regular basis, and we're finding other documents and letters and autographs and all sorts of fun things.
It's as house museums go, generally speaking, one of the things I like about them is that they rarely add things to a collection because it's usually already there. And likewise, they also usually don't deaccession things, or they don't, there's not a lot of change there. But I think you had a remarkable addition to your collection this spring, or last winter, or over the period of months, of Lady Beaverbrook's Land Rover. So why don't you, because I think that your car collection is remarkable. And because each one is so unique, and which is, I suppose, why it's in the collection. So would you like to talk to that?
I will. Maybe just before doing that, I should just say, as far as the exhibits change a little bit every year, so they're not static, and we don't want them to be static. And we do add things, and there's a trove more of stuff to add when we expand, and things that are, for example, we've got many hundreds, if not more than 1,000, old postcards going back into the 19th century, and all either written to or from family members or just blank ones, brand new. And we want to combine and have some kind of an exhibition of those. Again, we've got maybe thousands of Christmas cards.
Yeah.
My mother, well, first of all, they had lots of friends, so they received a lot of cards, and of course, nothing got thrown away. So we have interesting Christmas cards going way back, 100 years or so. And we also found, in doing this archival stuff, a lot of brand new Christmas cards. My mother did a lot of charity work, and she designed Christmas cards for the Unitarian Service Committee, for the Canadian Save the Children Fund, and other organizations. And she always ordered more than we needed for our own use. And so we have quite a few boxes of these Christmas cards, and we've just decided to make those available. So we actually have, in the entrance to the museum, we have a little display, and some of those are for sale.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and we also have some little sketches by my mother and watercolors and my grandfather, which are also available for sale. But now, Land Rover. I knew nothing of the fact that she was then Lady Dunn, had bought a Series 1 station wagon Land Rover. And I say Series 1 station wagon because they're apparently about the rarest of old Land Rovers. Anyway, she bought one brand new in 1955 as a gift for Sir James Dunn. And as I say, I knew nothing about it. Apparently it was sold after her death, but before I bought Dayspring. And last August, when I was down here, the chap who used to be a butler for Lady Beaverbrook and then continued to work for me after I bought the property, one day he said, you know that Lady Beaverbrook's Land Rover is just down the road in Boca Bay. And I said, I didn't even know she had a Land Rover, let alone where it was. He said, oh yeah, it's down there, and but I don't know if it's for sale, but I can find out if you want. So one thing led to another, and I ended up getting the Land Rover. The sellers were not very excited to sell it at first, which made it a little bit more expensive than it might otherwise be. Anyway, so at the end of August last year, we got it back, and the interesting thing about it is that it's completely unrestored. It's 1955, it has 13,000 miles on it, which is pretty unique for a car that's 65 years old. And I mean, even the tires were original.
Oh my.
We've taken the tires off and replaced them with new ones because it wouldn't pass inspection to get relicensed without safe tires. But I kept the old ones, and the spare tire is one of the original ones. But everything is original. The seats, the upholstery, the engine, everything. And so we have that now on display. And I have all the records as well, all the instruction books and the history, the sale papers and everything. So that's exciting, and it goes together with the other very special car in the collection, which is a 1947 standard Woody. It's one of these Woody station wagons, and that's the only one in the world. It was a one-off that they made as to see how it would function, and I got it by sheer happenstance in England, and brought it back. It was a 50th birthday present to myself.
Well, it's kind of fun because everybody is drawn to old cars. So if a family shows up at the museum, for example, and you've got the mother who's really interested in the paintings, and the father who's really interested in the architecture, and the 15-year-old kid, oh, I want to go see the cars. Yeah. It's almost like having a petting zoo.
And there also is a whole series of toys as well. Yeah, for kids, and a pole of Kinder eggs and toys suspended everywhere and horses. And
Yeah. Actually, I remember when that was installed originally, and I thought this is one of the most unique original installations of small toys I've ever seen. So I'm really very impressed with how the collection has been put together in many ways.
Well, everything was put together. I chose what was going to be shown, more or less. And then my partner, Roberto Menegatti, he did the entire museum installation. He'd never done one before. He's an interior architect and designer, but he'd never actually done a museum before. And everybody has given amazing compliments on how it's all turned out, and I think quite justifiably. And I can say it's well done because I had nothing to do with it.
Well, you know, one of the things that you said earlier, Vincent, which caught my attention, was the fact that the exhibits are not stagnant. And as with most museums, and the reason that most museums don't just take paintings in with any strings attached anymore is because they've run out of storage space. And you may not have run out of storage space, but I know from the get-go, you had more material than you could possibly hang in that house. So you can do thematic hangings, but you could take it all down and put up all new things. And that's what keeps people coming back, I think. So one of the things that I'd be curious to find out before we end is how do visitors resonate with the collection? Are they drawn mostly to the architecture of the house, or the cars, or how or your grandfather's paintings, or how does it seem to be panning out?
One thing that I've learned is that there is no normal, and it applies to hours of visits. You know, there's some days when nobody shows up till mid-afternoon. We're open officially at 10. This morning, by chance, somebody showed up at 9:45, and I happened to be there, so we opened up early. So some days people come early, some days people come late, some days people come throughout the whole day, and you can never predict how many people are coming, when they're coming. Does the weather have an influence? Nothing seems to. There's no logic to anything. Likewise, to the interest of individuals to the exhibits. You have young kids who fall in love with the paintings. You've got elderly seniors who love the toys. You've got women who like the cars. You've got men who like, some of the objects and the other. There is no. I can't tell you that that you can look at a visitor and say, okay, they're going to like this and that and that and that. And the other thing is, I find, I take people on tours sometimes myself when the tour guides are over busy or because I want to, or they're friends or something like that. And every time I go through it, I find something that I hadn't noticed before, which seems silly because I'm responsible for them all being there. But you forget things or you see things in a different light. So and it's fascinating. I love talking to the people who come there and find out where they are, what they're doing. People who are professors or artists will have the same mixed interest of things to people who are, staying in the trailer parks. Or there is no consistency whatsoever, and which makes it a little bit difficult to plan on, who's working when and hours. But it's sort of fun.
I think it speaks volumes to the level of quality of the collection. If people want to see everything, or if one person sees this and one person sees that, and it's not like everybody's going to see the Mona Lisa. It's a very eclectic and well developed, and I really think that it's a treasure in the province, and I thank you for creating this incredible treasure. And I thank you for coming and sitting with me today to talk about this amazing collection. And I thank you for watching the show, and I encourage you to go and see the Prager Oppenheimer Museum whenever you can when you're in St. Andrews. Until next time, enjoy.